Today, we dive into the transformative world of angel investing, a dynamic force driving innovation and change. Angel investing refers to the practice of individuals, often called angel investors, providing financial support to early-stage startups and entrepreneurs in exchange for equity ownership. Now, these investments not only fund groundbreaking ideas, but also they fuel economic growth, create jobs, and bring life-changing products and services to market. And in this episode, we'll explore with our guest and my friend, Marcia Dawood, how angel investing impacts industries, communities, and even personal legacies. And Marcia is especially passionate about helping women receive funding from angel investing. So we will show why it's more than just financial backing. It's a catalyst for making meaningful change. So hang on. This podcast is brought to you by DJ Works Media and HalftimeSuccess.com, offering resources and insights for those at mid-career or the halftime of life. Explore our diverse categories, including courses, coaching, health, music, software, and travel. We're here to help you make this stage of life your best ever. So get our new articles, downloads, and podcasts by signing up for weekly updates at goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Well, I'm so very, very excited to have Marcia with us today. Marcia, I met you back east at a speaking conference. Actually, it was a course that we were taking, and you had told me about what you did at that point, but I didn't totally really understand it with this angel investing. You know, we talked about it a little bit, but I've learned a lot since then and realized, you know, how valuable this is and in this field. And so I'm so excited to welcome you today. And I think I'm excited for our audience to hear about what you do, why you got into it. I love our guests to introduce themselves more than me introduce. I've been in situations where you have this long introduction. It's like, oh, okay, that's enough. But I'd love you to tell our audience a bit of your background and I just wanted to thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is great. So I was in corporate America for quite a while. I worked in sales and marketing for many, many years. And then I kind of got a little bored with that. So I moved into operations and realized that I was kind of the fixer. I was like the go-to person that people were like, this is a big problem. Can you fix it? So I got a lot of really good experience that way. And then one day, my husband, who's in finance, comes home and says, hey, we were invited to an angel investing meeting. And I go, cool. What's that?
Yes.
What's angel investing? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yes.
And so he's like, well, I'm not really sure what it is either. And I'm thinking, well, how do you not know? You're in finance, right? And he was like, well, it's a totally different thing. It has to do with entrepreneurs and companies that are very small. And I thought, okay, well, let's go check it out. So I go to the meeting. We're living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the time. So I'm not thinking that there's much innovation or exciting things happening in Pittsburgh. However, I was very wrong because I watched a couple local entrepreneurs tell us about their companies and what they were working on. And I was completely fascinated. I thought, oh my gosh, this is happening in my own backyard and I didn't even know it. Like, I was just amazed. So I thought, well, I'm really interested in this. And I feel like I've been in this corporate job, doing the same kind of thing for so long. I felt a little bit like I'd been living under a rock. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, let me get a little bit more acclimated to it. At the very beginning, I was kind of afraid to ask questions because I thought, oh dear, I'm like new and I don't really know what I'm talking about. And I would even lean over sometimes to my husband just in the first meeting and say, hey, what does that term mean? And he would be like, this is angel speak, we would call it. He's like, I'm used to dealing with, big company stuff. This is like very different. So I didn't feel so bad then. So I thought, okay, it's really something that could be for everybody. But we talk about it or did talk about it for many years. And it kind of was like for the elitist. Like I'm talking about like 10, 15, 20 years ago. You did kind of have to be very wealthy or you had to have an invitation to come into the room. But
Mm-hmm.
over the years that really the last like 10 so years that I've been involved, it's changed so much
Mm-hmm.
and it's so much more accessible to people, but we aren't talking about it enough. So to your point, like you hadn't really heard about it much. I talked to many, many people and they're like, that is really interesting. It's not like they don't want to do it or they wouldn't want to try it. They
Mm-hmm.
just have no idea that it would be something that they could do.
Yeah, and when with that term you think about angel investing, oh, let's just like pour money onto something, or just
Right.
angel like
Right.
is it a gift? What is it? So
Right.
I didn't know because I hadn't really heard the term that much, and and then I started listening to podcasts, and podcasts have grown too,
Mhm.
like exponentially. I mean, you now there's just a lot more information about it. So, for those that may not be as familiar with what the term means, why don't you just describe that and why it's different than other types of investing? Because I've bootstrapped everything I've done in my business. I've not taken outside investment, but many entrepreneurs, they have product and they have to duplicate, they have to provide product, they have to have investment, they've got to, so they can fulfill orders. So describe really what that is and why it's different than maybe other types of investments.
Right. So most people, when they think of investing, immediately they might think of the stock market or their 401k plan or their
Mhm.
retirement savings or something like that. And that is definitely one type of investing. Angel investing, very simply put, is using your own money, after tax dollars, in order to invest in a private company. So when we're talking about the stock market, those are publicly traded companies, meaning that there's a lot of information out on the internet that the company must provide to the Securities and Exchange Commission that is very readily available for everybody so that it's kind of a level playing field. Everybody knows a lot of any really any information about the financials, about the operations of the company can be found out. Private companies, there are many, many, many more private companies than there are public companies. Actually,
Mm.
the number of public companies has been shrinking over the last
Mm.
10 to 15 years. Lots of reasons. That would be a whole other podcast we could go into. But private companies, there's many, many, and there are all different sizes. But with private companies, they aren't regulated the same way because there's no way that our
Right.
regulatory system could handle all of that.
Right.
So in a lot of cases, what an angel does, and really where the term came from, and there's a whole history on where the term came from in the theater too. It came really from how backing Broadway shows. But the idea is that not only would an angel provide capital and financing to help fund a company, and we'll talk about scalability in a minute, but it also is to help them with their expertise, their network,
Mm.
things that might help the company to grow because growing a business and building any kind of a business is so, so, so hard. And an entrepreneur needs more than just money. They really do need help from everything expertise wise for opening doors. Maybe maybe they do have a product and they're trying to get into a company like Target or something like
Mhm.
that. And in a lot of cases, if you surround yourself with enough advisors and potential investors and investors, then those people might be able to help you open those doors. But the other really big difference between what you would consider a small business
Mm.
and a startup is that scalability aspect.
Mm.
So an
Yes.
angel investor or an early stage investor who's saying, look, I know this is risky. You're a very young company. You
Mhm.
might make it, you might not. And that's why we say, you only want to use a very small amount of your investable assets to invest in angel investing. But we want to see the company be able to scale to the level that we might be able to see ourselves as investors get even like a 10 times return
Mm.
on potential on our money. So it makes it worth taking the risk and then we can also talk about diversification later too, where we'd want to have more. But that's really the definition of the difference because I've talked to a lot of small businesses, which is wonderful. And there are a lot more ways that you can get capital if you are a small business. I'm talking like the coffee shop down the street, your dry cleaner, whatever you're doing locally. Those are wonderful. But a startup company is really has that scalability access. We talk about the hockey stick where you're going to say, okay, you're going to start small and you're going to have a little bit of revenue at the beginning. And then all of a sudden it's going to boom, 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 and it's going to go right up.
Right. Oh, and actually that has to be just so exciting as you are investing. And you can see that happening not only for your funds, and if depending on how much risk you've taken, and how much investment and how that pays off for you, but also for the company to see how it helps that company. And yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit too. So explain, like, how do individuals, if they're thinking, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, that's something that I would kind of like to see happen, or would they like to see changes in the world? How can they use this? Because that's also, it's a vehicle for change, for helping things change.
Right.
That you see some sort of passionate sort of project that you can see out there, whether it's giving water to those countries that need water, whether, a nonprofit, but it doesn't always have to be a nonprofit. It can be almost anything that you would want with a cause behind it.
That's right. And, charities are wonderful. They do so many amazing things. But if you look at the amount of charitable dollars on an annual basis here in the US, it's about $475 billion, which is a lot of money. But that is equivalent to only about 1% of the value of the US stock market. So remember, we talked about the stock market are public companies, and there are not nearly as many public companies as there are private companies. So imagine the amount of for-profit businesses that are out there. There's a huge amount of them. And here's this the nonprofits, the charities, who are trying so hard to actually get us the innovation that we want, to see the changes that we want to see in the world. But are we going to put all of that burden on these nonprofits to cure cancer, change the climate? That doesn't seem very fair, because they're not getting the kind of funding that they really need in order to make that happen. So there are so many people, entrepreneurs, people in universities who are working on innovation that needs to be commercialized, that needs to come out into the world. But there's a really big, difficult gap of how do you get from that early idea stage? Maybe they did work on it in university and then they're going to move that forward. How is it that we can help them to get that so that it does end up being something that we as consumers can use or take advantage of or get treatment for, or whatever the story is? Because placing this burden, to me, on charities is just so cumbersome. And why can't we partner together and kind of work together to make sure that those nonprofits are supported just as much?
It's such a great point, because I've had people in my contacts and my network that have specifically decided not to go the nonprofit route. They've decided to be still, but they're not making a lot of money, but they didn't want to go the nonprofit route. Right. So that is where, and it's like the American dream. You want your business to pay for itself, at least, even if you're at a point of your life where you don't need to make a whole lot of money. And people are at mid-career, halftime of life. It's not like you want to work 80 hours a week anymore. No, you want to do your schedule, and you want to be able to invest in things that are going to make a difference. You can make a little bit of money off that, but you don't need to make a whole lot. There's a lot of people like that. They have their funds, they're able to do that, and it can keep working for them and working, smart in an area to where you can actually help businesses develop so they can pay you a little bit, but also they can just really grow and give them that chance that they need, that sort of capital. That's a great point with that. And in fact, I get a little miffed sometimes at the nonprofit because I've been asked as a musician, oh, we're nonprofit. Cut your fee in half. What?
Right.
What?
And that's not fair.
No, it's not. Would I ask my plumber to come in who's asking for a certain amount just to come in at half. Oh, because I'm nonprofit. I think he'd laugh at me, so there's when you have a service, you're coming in, especially in the arts, especially, it's very, anybody who's been in this, you totally get it. It's a really like a, like a thorn here. But, and it just happened to me recently. So that's why it was really on my mind. But I am all for those nonprofits. I want to see them flourish, but don't cut everybody else down. Get some funding if you need to get, if you're,
that's right.
Putting a great event on, and if you're doing all of those, get something that you can move forward with, and don't cut other. It just gives a bad name for that. But I love the entrepreneurs who are. We want people to make money. We want them because they're going to put money back into the economy. That's exactly what we want.
Yep.
And they're going to, keep things going. That's the American dream. That's what people are here for. And that's why people want to come here, like for years and years and years. They want to be able to do that and to start from nothing. You can look at your local dry cleaners and how, they've come from somewhere and they're doing a great job. I tell you, those are workers. They love it, and they make money. They make good money. So there's nothing that's, so that is, it's just that's a great point on, how to invest maybe in some change that doesn't need to be with a nonprofit, and it can be something else. So, I mean, what if somebody's listening to this now and they go, oh, wow, that sounds really good. Where do I even start? What do I do? I mean, are there some resources, or what do they do? Of course, they can look up your website, and that will be in the show notes. We want to encourage everybody to do that. And of course, there's articles that come out all the time. Make sure you're signed up for those. But it's where do they start?
So I guess the simplest way to tell somebody is to go do an online search. Just go to Google and type in startup events and then just fill in your city. Or you could even do, now everything's like near me because it knows our location, which is kind of terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, crazy, I know.
But if you just said, startup events or entrepreneurial events near me. So because I'm always thinking to myself, look, if I'm living wherever I'm living, and there are entrepreneurs in every city and every town, everywhere around the entire globe. But we have so much going on in the middle of our country. We talk about Silicon Valley all the time. We talk about New York, Boston, but how about all the people in between and all of those things that they're doing?
Yeah.
So I always think, you know what? How about we just look locally and see what's happening? Go and maybe meet an entrepreneur. Watch them. We call it pitch. It's basically them talking about what they're doing, how they're going to grow the business, a little bit about, their business model, how they make money, all those things, and listen to how they're thinking about it, the innovation that they're trying to solve for.
Yeah.
And to me, that is a great way to learn without having to put up any money. I always tell people, look, if you are even thinking that this is interesting to you, you want to start to look at this without taking a checkbook or anything with you. Don't put any money up yet, right? Because you want to learn. I know that was my problem. So really the reason I wrote my book, Do Good While Doing Well, is because I wanted to tell people, look, I made a whole bunch of mistakes. Okay. I didn't really know better. And I would see an entrepreneur, fall in love with them. I've heard this over and over and over and over again from investors. You meet an entrepreneur, you're like, oh, that's so great. I love what they're doing. They're amazing. And they're solving they're going to save the world, all those times.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I want to invest. Well, like we talked about, you really only want a small amount of money that you're going to invest in this type of an asset class, we call it, where, it's risky. You're going to put your other investable assets into things like whatever you do, mutual funds, bonds, whatever. And you talk to your financial advisor about that. I am not a financial advisor, so do not take any advice from me. Lots of disclaimers there. However, if you're going to have this like little bucket of money that you could work with in order to help an entrepreneurial company or few, then you would want to be very careful at the beginning, because you don't want to be like me, who wrote a couple checks and then all of a sudden realized I was out of money. And then I would meet entrepreneurs and I would be like, oh, my bucket's empty. Okay. So I got to wait until there are what we call liquidity events or exits or something
Mm-hmm.
happens, because the reason why we say this is a risky asset class isn't just because a company might fail, but it's
Mm-hmm.
because of the liquidity assets. So if you think
Mm-hmm.
about it, if I wanted to go buy a share of, let's say, Apple stock, I could go to E-Trade or Robinhood and I could buy that share of stock, and 3 seconds later, if I wanted to, I could turn around and sell it.
Right.
And I could have, my money for the most part back or whatever it is. You can't do that in private investing. So it's very important that you understand that and know that you don't want to put money into an investment if you are unsure of the time horizon.
Right.
So I always tell people, be very careful not to use like your kids' college savings,
Yes.
or your retirement if you're very close to retirement age. I mean, there's lots of things to consider. That's why I always tell people to talk to their financial advisor. But these are the types of things to be thinking about in your overall portfolio. But then with this little bucket, there's a way that you can diversify even that little bucket portfolio too. And that's what I love so much about what's happened over the last 5 to 10 years. And that is that it's become so much more accessible. So to the point earlier, how would you start? Yes, you could look it up. You could go to an event in your town. But let's just say you didn't want to go outside or you didn't want to talk to anybody, which is totally fine too. You could go onto what's called an equity crowdfunding site. There's 3 that have the main market share for our country right now, which is Start Engine, WeFunder. We can put all this in the show notes, and Republic.com. Now, on my podcast, The Angel Next Door, I've had somebody from each of these 3 places, mainly the CEOs, come and talk about it. But let's just say you wanted to peruse. One of my friends calls it the lurk and learn. Okay.
Ooh,
so you can lurk around these websites, and you can learn about the different companies. And you, again, do not have to invest any money. But let's just say you did decide that you found a company that you wanted to. In equity crowdfunding, it's much, much, much more accessible because in some cases, the minimums are as low as $50 or $100.
Wow.
You're not talking about investing, thousands and thousands and even tens of thousands or whatever dollars. This is something I'm really passionate about, people learning this way, especially younger people. I love that the younger generation, the Gen Zs especially, they really like to, well, first of all, they want to do everything on their phone. I get it. But they can see things online and then they can make their decisions because this is the type of investment. Remember, I talked earlier about the public markets being regulated.
Right.
Equity crowdfunding is also regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And they have certain rules that these platforms have to abide by when a company is seeking funding.
Yes.
And so I really like that because that means every company, for the most part, is going to have to disclose the same type of information. So it makes it so even though the companies are going to be, obviously different because they're doing different things, you can kind of look at them and see similarities in the structure of how it's being presented and the type of company that's being built. And I like that because that really helps people to learn at the beginning without having to invest even one dime.
Wow. That is like a mouthful. Yes. So well said, though. And hopefully everyone's followed a lot of this. A couple takeaways here is number one, really put your listening ear on and listen and learn. Wait. Listen and learn. Do your research. Kind of see what's out there, what's local. Be willing to lose everything. That's important. My husband's been an RIA for years too, a registered investment advisor. So he's always with investment and he's in the market still a lot of time. But he said, with investing, sometimes he does take risks, but it's usually he knows what he can risk.
That's right.
And everything else is very well protected. And so I would not want to be in that field. There is no way I want to be in that field. But I have invested in my own business and I know what I can risk. A lot of times it's on marketing, it's on product, it's all of those. It ends up, but it's a long game. It's doesn't always come, right then. So and, creating is the same thing. It is a long game. And then investing in others, sometimes it's a long game. You don't know the full timing of that. And as you say, there's an exit or there's, some sort of resolution and to where you can get out of that. But very, very important, wise words. And yes, I will put some of those sources, although people can listen to this again, but I will put some of those sources in the show notes, and they can always go and, read your book and see some of your resources there. But yeah, that's such a good, and as we look at your book, Doing Good, that's what a lot of people want to do.
Yeah.
They want to kind of create this legacy at this point of life. They've worked a job, or they've come to a point now, kids are raised, or at least they're starting to be launched. It took a while. So, but to be launched and out. And so it frees you up in many, many respects. And you want to be able to give back. And not just leave everything to a family member or whatever. You want to be able to give back or to invest in something. And that's where that doing good, it comes in. And how now you, boy, we have talked about so much, a little bit of I hope we didn't skip over too many of the nuts and bolts here, because I think you covered a lot of those. But how can that, when we talk about doing good, really create maybe some impact? You talk about social impact as well, and different causes. And, there's a lot of, we're not going to go the political route here, because that could be, really divisive. But we're talking about what people need, social impact of, some of their basic needs, and that at this point with some of these companies. So how can you give a situation and how some of this angel investing can really make a difference in some of those companies?
Sure. And that's really why I started my podcast, The Angel Next Door. And I call it that because I want people to feel like it could be anybody can be an angel investor, and you could be your next door neighbor, and you could live anywhere. But I started the podcast, and it's evolved because I just hit over 100 episodes, which was fun. But it's evolved, but I started it because I wanted to know why. Why would you be an angel investor? Why are you an angel investor? Why are you an angel investor? That kind of thing. And so I just started to have people come on who have been angel investors for a little while and tell me, like, why do you do it? Where'd you get the money from to do it? That kind of thing. And how have you been doing it? And how's it going? Those types of things. And I always find that people will tell me their reasons. And usually not at the top of the list, even in the top 5, is money. So it's not like they're doing it. Of course, now let me just clarify. All angel investors want we want a financial return, okay?
Yes,
we do.
Exactly. Because you want to be able to reinvest. Of course
That's
you do.
Exactly right. Yes. But I would have to say some of the number one things are creating jobs. And you said it earlier about economic empowerment, economic development. Those things can go so far. And I just think if we talked about this more, and the things that are happening, again, if we're talking about the middle of the country, imagine if we could really start to empower some smaller towns and smaller cities to allow those entrepreneurial companies to grow. What can happen? It's just amazing. And then the other thing that I really think is so fun, and I know that I try to talk about it as much as I can, and people then go, oh yeah, of course, is the networking aspect. So my husband's a huge golfer, and he would meet people on the golf course, and he'd come home and tell me, I got to play golf with XYZ or whatever. And I would get kind of annoyed. And then I thought to myself, why can't this golf thing take the same amount of time as a yoga class? Like, it just would drive me crazy, right?
Yes.
I'm not a golfer. And then one day it just kind of dawned on me. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not upset that he's playing golf. I'm jealous that he has this network opportunity. He gets to meet people and talk to them for 4 or 5 hours while they drive around in a cart, chase some little ball, right? And I think to myself, well, how do I get that kind of opportunity? And sure, you can go to networking events, and again, a lot of people are like, that's lovely, but then you end up standing talking to somebody about like the weather or whatever it is. Exactly. This is so interesting with angel investing because you don't ever, at least I don't, and a lot of people don't, invest alone. You're investing with a group. You're either in an angel group, you're a part of a fund, you're a part of just people getting together and talking about a company because you want to highlight the company and what they're doing. And so now all of a sudden I'm meeting super cool, really smart people, really fun. And we have a common thing to talk about where I'm talking about my expertise toward what I would know about that company, but they're talking about their expertise too. And it might be totally different. So, like, for example, I'm super passionate about anything that's helping healthcare in healthcare. Like if it's helping to cure cancer or do anything like that, I'm all in. Except I'm not a scientist. So you do not want me doing all of the research, okay? Because I don't know, right? So I would have to go to my science friends and say, hey, you know about this. Let's talk about it, blah, blah, blah. And in some cases, they might be angel investors and they might be interested in investing too. And in other cases, it just might be, hey, I know somebody who really knows this space. Let me go talk to them. And now all of a sudden, the network effect is happening in a way that you don't really see, or you wouldn't necessarily see, right away. So I finally said, you know what? Angel investing is my golf course.
No, I love that because I told my husband some years ago, oh, come and play golf again, because his family, he grew up golfing.
Right.
I just remembered the day that I said, no more.
No more.
5 hours hitting. I'm too frustrated. I'd rather ride in the cart or just take a walk around the course.
Right.
There's a lot of other things. And networking, yes, it's true. When you work together or you're on a common goal, there's just something sweet that happens there. And connection is huge right now. We are very separated. I think especially COVID did this with our shutdowns. People realized they were having mental problems. They were having depression.
Yeah.
Kids especially, my gosh. So we are social. Even I'm an introvert, but there's a lot that plans socially but I'm an entertainer and a hospitality, love having people. There's a lot that you connect with people. And so you really need that. And I love that you said that this is your space, and especially with healthcare right now.
Yeah.
That's really huge. With cancer and with some of these issues that there may be, these little issues that come up that we've not heard of, a particular type of leukemia or a type of, and there's companies out there that need to be for profit and they want to develop this, but they need that sort of funding. And so, by doing that, Marcia, you are educating yourself because
yes,
I'm not going to be in the financial. I do not have the head for numbers that my husband does. It just is in his head. Oh no, I got the calculator out. I'm doing my reconciling. I'm doing all of that. And I end up doing fine, but it takes me a little more time. So you're with some of those people that have that sort of natural explanation and bent. And so you can learn from them and you can make an intelligent decision for change and really move the needle ahead. How exciting. Would you have maybe an example of maybe it's happened in your life with healthcare or with somebody that you've worked with of just, something that's kind of flourished under, and we hear about these things. I do because I love listening to, How I Made It and all of those sort of podcasts. But I love hearing specifically on like an angel investing, what can happen by doing good and that it can do well.
Yes. One of my favorite stories to tell is a company called Joylux, and it's run by the founder, Colette Cordion, and she is an incredible entrepreneur. And she has a women's health company focused on pelvic floor health. And as you can imagine, that is not a topic that people talk about very often.
No, it's kind of, you think, oh, don't want to talk about that.
Exactly. So you can imagine when she went to first start pitching and most of the investors were male, they didn't necessarily want to talk about pelvic floor problems. And they certainly did not think it was an actual problem, heaven forbid. They would say things like, well, my wife doesn't have that problem.
Yeah,
And
must not
so,
exist.
so it really doesn't exist. And we would just laugh and be like, oh, your wife probably does have that problem. She's not telling you.
Yes.
Right. And so,
yes.
So it just went on and on. And
oh my gosh.
Colette has some of the greatest stories about what has happened, but she's managed to build the company. During COVID, I remember her having an all investor kind of hands-on call on March 15th. So she knew as we were going into lockdown, this is something we're going to have to pivot. We're going to have to make change. And she did. And her business is now thriving. They've sold over 100,000 pelvic floor devices. And the biggest news is they just partnered with Halle Berry and now have their device and one of Halle's products put together. And it's just, they've been really, really thriving.
Wow.
And I just love seeing how many women have been helped because this product now exists. And I just can't say enough about not just the product and the fact that it is, I'm a huge fan just because it is helping solve a big problem. Right. But now partner that with an entrepreneur that just has that business mindset that's so gutsy and so level-headed in the most difficult of times to be able to say, look, this is what we have to do for the business in order to make it thrive. And and it's able to make those tough decisions. And she has just done an incredible job.
What I love about this, Marcia, is we're all busy. I get up incredibly early. And I love what I do. I never want to quit until I say I'll never quit until my boys put me in a home. But, I'm just going to keep going. I love it. It's work. It is work. 4-letter word, work. Yes. But this is a way that I don't want to run another business. I don't want to, have a passion for something and have to be, involved in those everyday decisions. I don't have time. And I don't have all of that expertise. So this is a way of impact, of really helping others. And I also liked another part of this was that connection. How exciting is that? Because when you get to see, not every company is going to be like this particular company with the pelvic floor company. That's what I'm now. It's just really in my mind. Oh, pelvic, right. But what an important one, because I've known women like this too. And it's something as you gracefully get older, there's different things that happen to your body. And wow. Yes, we know, we don't always share them either because people don't understand. Right. But that's very, very important. And you're able to see how it's going to help others and how it's grown. How exciting to see the partnership there and that you've got some of those connections that you've all gone together on this journey and you get that communication. What a fun email. Oh my gosh. Oh, look what happened. Oh, how exciting. That is so fulfilling. But you don't have to be a part of the everyday gritty parts.
That's exactly right.
Making those sort of decisions. There are people and they need to be paid for that. There's a lot of these entrepreneurs that are taking these huge risks that don't pay themselves for years.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. They're living on nothing hardly. They're really, and to be able to help that business out that you believe in so they at least at some point can be paid for their work, paid fairly so they can live. I think of middle America. I always think of, the heartland and with, the farms and with, and a lot of the technology that's improved and growing and to be able to feed our country. And many of those, in the past, the government has done this with the farm aid and whatever, but a lot of those don't want that sort of help. They don't want to be tied to something that they have to do. Okay, you have to give this, you have to do this. They want to be private. They want to be the entrepreneur. They don't want to depend on that. And so by being able to do that local research, how valuable that is. And I'm excited about that. That's really, really fun because there are things I've loved to have people invest in, but I don't want to start it. I don't. I'd rather be a part. I don't have time to do it well. I don't have to do it really, really well. I need to partner with people that are already doing it, that I believe in, that I think have a good track record, that have the integrity, that have the expertise. That's very, very important. Doing the research. That was an important part. Well, we've talked about a little bit how angel investing is different than just traditional charity. I mean, it's because with charity, you're not going to expect anything in return.
That's right.
That is just giving, and we do a certain amount of that. And actually, there's a lot of generosity in our country with charity too, and which is wonderful. You go to these events, and wonderful to see that. I'm excited to see that. But how do you feel? Very few women are the recipients of some of this. So when we look at the differences between, the angel investing and the charity and giving to that, why are women discounted many times in this area? Is it because they're not taken seriously? What are some of those reasons, and how do you overcome those?
Yeah. So just to kind of tie all that together, first of all, the biggest problem about women not getting funding is we just don't have enough other women who are writing checks. So people tend to back the people that look like them. I mean, it's just like when you think about hiring, people tend to hire a lot of times people that look like them. And so right now in angel world, it's a little bit better, but really with venture capital, which is the bigger dollars that go to private companies, women are only getting about 2-3% at most.
Wow.
And you can't tell me that women being 50% of the population only have like 3% of the good ideas, right? It sounds crazy.
Oh, no.
So how do we change this? We've got to get more women writing checks. So how do we do that? So that's really been the thing that I have been focused on for the last at least 8 years of the time that I've been an angel investor. And I did become early on a member of a group called Golden Seeds, and they invest only in women-led companies, meaning, and it doesn't have to be an entire company full of women. It means that there is a significant amount of equity and decision-making going on by at least one woman in the company. And so we're trying to make sure that women really are getting a seat at the table. And so to me, this is super important. So how do we get women to become investors? Well, I've talked to so many who have told me investing, oh, geez, I don't know. It's like, it's kind of scary. And I don't really, my husband does that. I don't do it, that kind of thing. But we're coming into a time where literally, as we're having this conversation, trillions of dollars of wealth is being transferred, and a lot of it to women, right?
Yes.
So how do we make sure that that money is going to be utilized in the same way that in the past, all these guys were like, they'd be on the golf course, literally, not to bring up the golf course again, but and they're like, talking to each other, hey, do you want in on this deal? Do you want in on this deal? And the next thing you know, they've got like funding for a big company and then they're making money on it.
Yes.
We need to make sure that women have those same opportunities, but it really comes down to making sure that they're aware of it. So there is a way that you can, and this is something I talk about quite a bit on my podcast lately, and I do have on my website playlists so that if people are really interested in one topic or another topic, they can go there and see what episodes correspond.
Very good.
You can take philanthropic dollars. So you could make a charitable donation, just like you would to a charity where you get your tax deduction right away. However, that money, and most of the time it's going to be put into what's called a donor advised fund. But that money can, in the meantime, before it actually goes to a traditional 501c3 nonprofit, it can be used for a for-profit company as an investment. Kind of like if you were think about it, if you put money into a donor advised fund and you wanted to use it in the meantime to invest in a mutual fund, you're allowed to do that. With certain types of donor advised funds, you can invest in a for-profit company. And what I love about this is women are very conditioned, I guess I'll use that word, to donate to charity.
Yes.
before they would necessarily even think about investing. So if this is something that they're comfortable with, I'm okay with that. Like, how can we now use that so that we can help other women? And I think that's something that we just need to keep talking about more and more and let people really understand the differences. I mean, we could have a whole podcast episode on the nuances of it, but it's really at the end of the day, quite simple. You do get your tax donation or your tax deduction right away. You would be able to, in the meantime, before it's going to go to your charity of choice, you could potentially allow a female entrepreneur in this particular example to be able to use that money in order to grow her company. Now, the win-win-win would be that in that time frame, said female entrepreneur actually grows the company, exits the company, and now in that fund to go to your charity of choice is triple the amount of money that you put in, right? That's the whole idea. So I think if we can keep talking about this and get people more comfortable with it, we're going to start to see the needle move.
Wow. Yeah. Exciting. I mean, and for some people listening going, oh, that sounds good, but I'm still confused. So they can look at your website. They can read your book.
Yeah.
And also you'll have those resources. And that's important. Again, we go back to listen and learn. Because the things we've talked about, the principles we've talked about are very important. Those are very clearly understood. It's just then you get down to the little nitty gritty and a lot of people go, oh, I just don't want to bother with it. Oh, that's just too involved. Da, 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 da. No, it's not too involved. It's something that's very doable. Systematic. So, but do the research, listen how important that is. When you're starting a business, how much, I didn't even realize I was an entrepreneur until I got, way into my career. I thought, oh, that's what I am. So, they didn't have that course when I went to school. It was, it's either performance or teaching. So, with the field I was in. So it was the, doing that, listen, learn, study, connect, because I would think that you could hang around some of those people just like hanging around on a golf course.
That's right.
Learn from them and see what's happening with certain companies. If you're in healthcare, you can see what's happening with some of those. That should be pretty easy to follow and all of that. So what great information. Well, if there's, I'm going to have you speak your information here in a moment, even though it'll be in the show notes. So no worries. And there's articles that go with this, with our newsletter, goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. Don't miss a single one. I don't send spam. I don't send tons of stuff. It's just, our podcasts and articles. But some product too, but it's all in there. So, Marcia, what is maybe one or two? It's hard to come up with one, isn't it? A little takeaway. People are listening to this and they're going, "Oh, this sounds good, but what do I do? What sort of takeaway would you want people to leave with?"
Yeah, I would say that let's talk about going from daunting to doable. Ooh. And that's really why I wrote the book. And so the book, you can get it on Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble, all the places, right? And in a lot of cases, I do run promotions. You can get the Kindle oftentimes for 99 cents. I have an Audible book, all those kind of things. And everything that we talked about in the episode today, including all the stuff about using philanthropic dollars, is all explained in the book, pretty clearly. Cool. So what I found in talking to people was a little bit of your reaction right there at the end when you're saying, okay, we just talked about a whole lot of stuff and it was like a lot. What are we going to do here?
Yeah, right.
And I just want people to realize that it does seem daunting. And I remember thinking when I went to my first meeting, this is like a lot of terms I've never heard before. I don't know if this is for me, kind of thing. But I was just so driven by this idea of I can help affect change.
Yeah.
Me, just like as one person. Yeah. And so that to me was a real motivator. And I thought, well, how can I help other people? Because remember, I mentioned my little bucket of money was getting pretty empty. And it's gotten refilled a couple times, which is great. But I'm not like the people on TV which fly private planes and do all kinds of crazy investing. So I personally ran out of money and I thought, well, what can I do? But I've learned so much. I did all these different things. I tried everything. I made all the mistakes, and I thought, well, I should just try to make it so that it can go from daunting to doable. And I think that's really was my whole mission in putting the podcast together and then also the book.
And again, I'm going to go back to that point of that you have to don't invest what you can't risk or you can't lose. And that my husband said that a lot, many times.
Right.
So yeah.
And that's any investment, right?
Any investment, including angel investing. Yes. So tell us how people can contact you the best way and how can they, well, you've told us how they can get your book. Right. How can they contact you for any more information or find your podcast? So.
Yeah, everything is on my website. So it's just my name, Marcia, Marcia, Dawood, DAWOOD.com. And on there, I also do have a free giveaway of the introduction to the book and chapter 1. You can download for free. So lots of things, lots of resources. In the book, I talk about a Halo strategy, which is just a 1-page worksheet of a couple exercises you can do to see if this is for you. And you can download that for free. So lots of things, lots of places that, you can be pointed to of the different things that you're interested in. And, in some cases, like we were talking about with equity crowdfunding, that isn't something that's very hard to do. It's easy to find the websites. And you could literally learn with your family sometimes too, which is awfully fun. I know I have 3 stepsons, and as they were growing up, I would talk to them about what I was seeing in the different types of companies. And it was great dinner conversation, just being able to talk about the things that were going on in the world. So I always encourage people to just learn, talk about it with your family, talk about it with your friends. And, it's a really fun way to connect with people.
Well, I'm leaving this interview just inspired as well, because I love the whole process of being able to help others. And it's really what I do in my business. But in some other ways too, some little small ways, in other areas. But it's just a wonderful, and I do that in different ways with, having affiliates and all of that. So with our halftime success. But there's, it's just fun to hear there's a lot of other types of businesses that can really benefit from just, like you say, little seed money of just, being able to invest. So thank you so much for being with us today. It's just a wonderful time. I've learned some things, and there will be some show notes, and I'd have to look at my full notes to see if there'll be a full article, because usually I expand on some of the principles and some of the resources and all of that. So, but look for those, goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. And I will be back again. Love to be able to do these podcasts. And they're so much fun to do. And especially our interviews. I've really enjoyed them all over the world. So thanks again, Marcia, for being with us today. And so fun to stay connected from that very first time we've met, and to just see these businesses grow and to see these books come out that are just really helping others. So, and thank you all for joining us, and I'll look forward to being with you again next time. So bye-bye for now. Thank you for joining us. It is because of our wonderful listeners like you that we keep going strong week after week. We'd love it if you'd share and follow us to not miss a single show, and even write a review. You can also find all of our articles, products, and links at womenathalftime.com.